Hello YouTube, Sidekick here with another installment of the video series that I'm calling the Warbird Survival Guide. This is the second video in the series. In part 1 I talked about why warbirds can be frustrating to fly in modern flight sims like DCS and Microsoft Flight Simulator, and why the problem seems to be getting worse as the fidelity of the flight models increases. In that video I talked about some ideas for improving your warbird flying. This video is kind of my way of putting my money where my mouth was and actually trying to take some of my own advice. Specifically, I'm going to take my own advice to just go out and fly the airplane. Well, actually a couple of planes. And I'm going to practice a technique that's going to force me to keep my eye on the ball, which was tip number 3, and fly with both my hands and feet, which was tip number 5. The exercise is called Lazy 8s, and it's actually part of the training for a commercial pilot's license, at least in the U.S. Because it's a training exercise, I'm actually going to get out of my trusty jug here for the first part of the video and actually switch aircraft, and in fact switch simulators for the first part of the video. And that's because I want to start practicing this maneuver in an actual trainer aircraft. And what better trainer than the one that trained literally tens of thousands of Warbird pilots, the AT-6 Texan, or Harvard, as everyone in the British Commonwealth calls it. Now, there is no Harvard model in DCS, a point which I would love to see corrected. Someone? Anyone? But there is a pretty good model in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It comes with the basic Reno Air Races pack, which I frankly picked up just so I could fly the Harvard. So, here I am in my Harvard, flying out of the Gatineau Airport, across the river from Ottawa, where I live, and which is actually home to a genuine, real-life, flying Harvard. We've taken off and turned around and are flying down the river, setting up to try some Lazy 8s. Now, a Lazy 8 is actually a deceptively simple-looking maneuver. It basically looks a bit like a skateboarder doing a turn and a half pipe. In it, you perform a 180-degree turn. The turn starts out as a climb, goes over the top halfway through, and comes back down the other side. When done correctly, it ends at the same altitude and speed that it started at. The key point of the Lazy 8 is just how little the pilot has to do to complete it properly. We'll start the first one here. Start a little bit of bank, and I pull a little bit. I'm going to watch the ball. I'm going to keep my foot on the rudder and keep the ball exactly in the middle. The aircraft is going to come around. I'm really not doing very much to control it as it comes across the highway there, which is the 90-degree angle. The nose comes through the horizon, and the airplane starts back down the other side. I'm just keeping the turn coordinated, and then at about 135 degrees, so halfway through there, I'm just rolling out and letting the nose come back to level and trying to come back to the same airspeed and altitude that I started at, and I'm basically on the other side of the highway. Now, if you were paying attention, that actually wasn't bad. I came back to pretty close to the same altitude, about 2,700 feet, and the same speed. Not all of my Lazy 8s go that well. Now, getting a Lazy 8 right is all about knowing just exactly how little to control to exert. As you go over the top, you're really doing very little with the controls other than to keep them coordinated. Just a subtle bit of back pressure is all that it takes. The plane is rolling itself over, and you're just trying to follow it around. So as we come back down the other side of the Lazy 8, you can see I lost coordination just a little bit there. Let the ball get off the middle. And when I'm coming out again, not a bad effort. Now I will point out that going to the left is easier than going to the right, which we're going to try in a minute. This is what it looks like from the outside. See, it's a very graceful maneuver. The plane is just rolling over the top. As it gets halfway through the turn, the nose comes back through the horizon, and you go back down the other side. Okay, so let's go back to the jug. Now that we've had a trial with the trainer airplane, let's go to the real thing and see how we can do. So the reason that this is a bit of a challenge in a flight simulator is that doing a Lazy 8 well really relies on feeling the aircraft, on keeping your control inputs very subtle and just exactly the right size and keeping them smooth and continuous. And that's hard to do in a simulator where you really don't have a lot of those feel cues. So learning to fly a Lazy 8 will mean that you have to learn to pick up on the subtle cues that the simulator does give you, and that's why it's worth the practice. So one little advantage we do have in DCS is we have the controls indicator up there in the lower left-hand corner. Again, we're pulling up to the left, just initiating a turn and a pull-up. You can see the aircraft, what it looks like from the outside there in the inset. Nose is coming across 90 degrees and through the horizon. Back down, you can see I'm doing almost nothing with the controls. I am holding a little bit of left rudder because centered would actually be a little bit of right rudder. And now we're coming back down. Well, that wasn't bad, but I let it get away on me a little there at the end. Need a little bit more back pressure, lost about 4, maybe 500 feet beyond what I should have. So again, this is why we practice in the Harvard first. It's a little bit easier, a little bit more forgiving. Jug takes a little bit more work because it is a bit more high performance and it is easier for it to get away on you. But that's kind of the point, and that's why it's actually really useful, at least for me, to go back and forth between the trainer, an honest-to-goodness Warbird trainer, and the actual high-performance aircraft, and learning to see how you really do need to stay on top of how the technique feels to avoid letting it get away on you, especially, and that becomes especially true the higher performance the aircraft becomes. So this is good training. I'm finding I'm really learning a lot by this practice. So here we go again. Start with a little bank. We pull up subtly, hold a little bit of back pressure, a little bit of rudder, wait for the nose to come through 90, and then it slides through the horizon, and you're really modulating that with the rudder. And now it's a matter of pulling out and pulling back and trying to do that exactly right to come back out at the same altitude. And that one was a little better. Let's take a look at what it looks like from the outside. So make no mistake, I'm not having to do a lot with the controls, but I am having to be very precise with the motions I make in order to end up with a very precise Lazy 8, and that's kind of the point. Okay, so again, let's go to the right. Now, right is harder because of the effects of the engine, and you have to add a lot more rudder, and you have to be a lot more active on the rudder to keep this Lazy 8 as precise. So again, doing very little with the stick, but you can see that I am having to put in a fair bit of rudder. Trying to keep the ball in the middle, now trying to keep the nose tracking so it's not losing too much altitude, but is losing the right amount. And not a bad effort, but again, I just let it get away from me a little at the end, and I've ended up about 300 to 400 feet below where I want it to be. But that's why you practice, right? So climb back up again. We'll just do one more to the right. And a couple to the left. So get back to the altitude we want to be at. And again, it starts with a small amount of bank and then pull. And the bank will increase on its own, especially if you keep coordinated. As the aircraft slows down, you need to add more rudder. Just keep the rudder in, keep everything pretty much where it is as you go across the top, and then as you reach that 135 degree point, you need to pick the point where you need to start rolling out and also adding a little bit more back pressure so you pull out at the right time. But if you do it too early, you end up being a little bit too high. And this one's going to be pretty close. It was a little bit high, though. Okay, now, the other reason to practice Lazy 8s, as much as I do actually am enjoying just the subtle flying, is that the Lazy 8, when it starts to get a little bit more aggressive, it gradually turns itself into a much more standard combat style maneuver, which is, of course, the wing over, which is what I'm performing here. Basically, it started like a Lazy 8, but instead of modulating that back pressure, I'm letting the nose come all the way through until it's pointing at my target on the ground, and then I'm rolling out and I'm actually going to dive in on the target. Now, in this case, the target's on the ground, but that target could just as well be an enemy aircraft. And so now we're going to do a nice low pass, give the folks on the beach a look at the jug in its training livery, and pull back up. But again, the thing about it is that if you go and practice this, you'll find that going from the lazy 8, which is a very subtle maneuver, all the way to a wing over, which is, in that case, a pretty aggressive maneuver, takes very little effort, and it actually feels very similar. And that wing over is going to be much easier to control if you perform it in the same way that you do the lazy 8 and let the aircraft do most of the work. So we're going to do another one here. Again, pull up a little higher, keep the foot on the right rudder, which gets that nose coming down through the horizon. And then instead of pulling back, just actually add a little bit of pressure to let it keep coming around. And then when the target's in view, just roll out very gently and be pointed straight at your target and be headed downhill in a hurry, especially in the jug. Again, now we have lots of time to line up on the target, lots of time to get ready. We're not struggling with the controls. And we've done a beautiful wing over and ended up on the target. Okay, why don't we do just one more? We've got a set of buildings here, a farm or something that's coming by on the left. We'll use that as the target this time. So we'll start pulling up here beside the target. Pull up, try and maintain our airspeed and climb at the same time. Get a decent altitude. And again, all we're going to do is initiate a very small bank. We're going to step on the rudder to keep it coordinated and start adding a little bit of stick back pressure. But you can see not even very much. Don't need a whole heck of a lot to actually perform this maneuver. But we're going to go up over the top. And as you can see, this one's, again, we're rolled all the way past 90 degrees almost. Come around the corner and end up pointed back at the ground at the target we flew by. We're going to roll out, we're going to pick up the target. Yeah, almost as relaxing as doing the lazy 8s in our training aircraft. So anyways, there you have it. Lazy 8s, good training for warbird flying, good training for wing overs. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you did. There'll probably be some more on the way soon. For now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.